Before we begin, if you want the full continuation of these stories, more uncensored 18-plus ancient BL content, extended scenes, and unlimited royal forbidden romance, you can join us on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. YouTube does not allow us to show or monetize everything freely here, so the deeper and more intense versions are waiting for you there. You can find the link in the description and pinned comment. Part 1, Ink, Steel, and Rain. The night the Empire tried to erase him, the bamboo forest smelled of wet earth and blood. Crown Prince Jian had always believed treason would announce itself loudly. He expected it to come with the clash of steel, screaming banners, and visible chaos. He did not expect it to arrive softly, wrapped in the quiet routine of a royal hunt, wearing the familiar armor of the man who had guarded his back for 10 long years. General Ming did not look like a traitor. He looked patient. The ancient forest on the edge of the capital was a cathedral of swaying green and silver moonlight. The pines towered over them like silent judges. Shadows shifted in the dark beyond the torches, reflecting fractured gold on the wet leaves. Jian smelled the metallic tang of blood before he even felt the blade. The first arrow slipped under his ribs with the clean, terrifying efficiency of a practiced execution. The second tore across his shoulder, spinning his world into sharp branches and the suffocating smell of damp soil. He did not fall immediately. He stayed on his feet, his hand gripping the trunk of a tree, and he stared at Ming. Ming did not rush to him. He did not draw his sword to finish it. He simply stood there, his face completely unreadable. "Leave him," Ming said calmly to the imperial guards, men who had once sworn their lives to Jian. That was when Jian understood. It didn't hit him with shock. It didn't hit him with rage. It hit him with a grief so sharp, it felt like a third arrow burying itself in his chest. The sound of hooves faded. The torches retreated. The heavy, relentless rain began to fall. Crown Prince Jian, the heir to the dragon throne, the most feared warrior in the northern provinces, lay bleeding in the mud while the forest breathed in and out beside him, completely indifferent to his death. He did not cry out. Royalty endured, but endurance, he was quickly discovering, had its limits. Then, footsteps approached. They were uneven, uncertain, slipping slightly in the mud. A voice, soft and strained by panic, cut through the rain. Hey, can you hear me?" Jian forced his heavy eyes open. A stranger knelt over him. His long, dark hair was plastered to his pale face, his simple cotton robe soaked through. He clutched a bamboo umbrella in one hand and a wooden carrying case of scrolls in the other, holding them like a shield. Not a soldier, not an assassin, a scholar. "Don't die," the stranger whispered, his hands hovering over Jian's bleeding side. "Please," Jian tasted rust on his tongue. "Who sent you?" He managed to rasp. "No one," the scholar said, his eyes wide. I just found you." Jean studied the young man's face through the haze of rain and agony. He was terrified. He was honest. And he was determined. "If you stay here," the scholar said, his voice shaking but refusing to break, "you will bleed out before morning. If you come with me, you might not. Coincidences did not exist in the imperial court. But death did. Help me up," Jian whispered. The pavilion of whispers. Luo Wen did not plan to save the crown prince that night. He had come to the forest chasing a rumor. At 24, Luo Wen was a low-ranking imperial archivist, exiled to a quiet pavilion on the outskirts of the city. He was known among a very small, very dangerous circle of informants as the Weaver, a master of ciphers who could trace forged imperial seals, missing tax grain, and encrypted messenger pigeons without ever leaving a footprint of his own. Noble families feared his anonymous missives without knowing his name. But Luo Wen was not brave. He was just deeply, fatally curious. And curiosity had dragged him through the rain-soaked woods, to investigate a sudden, unexplained shift in the patrol routes of the Capitol Guard. Then, he found the blood. Then, he found Jian. Luo Wen's secluded estate was small, cluttered, and alive with paper. Scrolls were stacked like uneven mountains. The air smelled of bitter tea, dried ink, and sharp citrus. Jian drifted in and out of consciousness as Luo Wen stitched his wound by the flickering light of a single oil lamp, his hands trembling slightly, but never failing. "You are not a physician," Jian murmured, his voice rough. "I read a lot of medical texts," Luo Wen replied, pulling a thread tight. "That is not comforting." Luo Wen almost smiled. When Jian finally lost consciousness, falling into a deep, feverish sleep, Luo Wen sat back on the wooden floor. He looked down at his hands. They were covered in royal blood. He knew exactly who was lying on his bed. He had recognized the jade token on Jian's belt immediately. He didn't panic. Instead, he walked over to his desk, unrolled a blank scroll, ground his inkstone, and began to trace the shape of a massive conspiracy. When Jian woke 2 days later, the room was quiet. The rain had stopped. He heard the soft, relentless scratching of a brush against paper. Luo Wen sat before a low table, his eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. Maps were spread out before him. Intercepted letters, wax seals broken and remelted. "You shouldn't be awake," Luo Wen said softly, not looking up from his work. "Show me," Jian commanded, his voice holding the low, resonant authority of a ruler, even when broken. Luo Wen slowly turned the maps around. "Someone copied your personal seal months ago. They have been rerouting military provisions through shadow merchants in the southern provinces, quietly replacing your loyal generals with their own men." Jian went completely still. "That is impossible." "No," Luo Wen said gently, his dark eyes meeting Jian's. "It is very possible. It just takes patience." Ming. The name did not ignite a fiery rage in Jian's chest. Instead, it hollowed him out from the inside. It left a cold, empty cavern where his trust is to be. "He is dismantling your power," Luo Wen continued softly. "Financially. Logistically. And the ambush in the forest was staged so no one in the court will question the shift in military command when they announce you died Taubendits." Jian gripped the edge of the sleeping mat, his knuckles turning white. "Can you prove this?" Luo Wen held his gaze. Yes. That was the exact moment Jian's life stopped belonging to the throne and began, quietly, to orbit Luo Wen. The recovery forced an intimacy that neither of them fully understood, and neither of them knew how to handle. Luo Wen had to help Jian sit up. He had to help him drink bitter medicinal teas. He had to change his bandages, his fingers brushing against the hard, scarred planes of the prince's chest. Jian, a man who commanded legions with a mere glance, found himself leaning his weight on a quiet archivist who apologized every time his hands accidentally lingered too long on Jian's skin. At night, Jian listened to the rhythm of Luo Wen writing in the dark. He learned Luo Wen's habits, the way he chewed his lower lip when deciphering a particularly difficult code, the unconscious, soft humming when he was focused. The anxious way he wiped his inkstone clean twice before sleeping. And Luo Wen learned Jian's silences. He learned the silence that meant physical pain, the silence that meant deep calculation, and the heavy, suffocating silence that meant he was remembering General Ming. "You trusted him," Luo Wen said one evening, the candlelight casting long shadows across the room. "Yes." Jian stared at the ceiling. "Why?" "Because he once saved my life on the northern battlefields." Luo Wen nodded slowly, his eyes dropping to the floor. "And now, you are letting me save yours." Jian turned his head to look at him. "I am." Luo Wen gestured slightly to the mountains of paper around them. "I have spent my whole life tracing secrets that belonged to other people, things that didn't really matter. But this matters." Jian looked at him for a long, quiet time. For the first time since he bled in the mud of the bamboo forest, he did not feel like he was drowning in betrayal. He felt anchored. And strangely, that frightened him much more than the arrows ever did. And if you are enjoying this forbidden royal tension, remember, the extended and uncensored 18+ continuation is available on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. The link is in the description and pinned comment. Part 2. When the Hunter Learns. He was seen, morning in the capital, arrived pale and indifferent, as if the imperial city had not conspired with the night to nearly erase its future emperor. Luo Wen had not slept. Columns of characters layered his vision even when he blinked. He was mapping courier routes, tracking military ledgers, and finding the tiny, delicate lies hidden in the imperial archives. Jian watched him from the bed. Over the past few weeks, the Crown Prince had returned to himself in fragments. His authoritative voice had returned, his measured, silent breathing. The stillness that meant he was calculating a killing blow rather than nursing a wound. But there was something entirely new in the way he looked at Luo Wen now. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was recognition. It was a slow-burning, quiet fascination. "You found something," Jian said, his voice low in the quiet room. Luo Wen nodded without turning around. "General Ming isn't just taking your assets. He's preparing for a war he thinks has already ended." Jian stood up slowly. He wore only a loose inner robe, his chest partially exposed, the white bandages stark against his skin. He moved silently to Luo Wen's side, standing so close that Luo Wen could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Explain," Jian murmured, his voice vibrating slightly near Luo Wen's ear. Luo Wen swallowed hard, trying to ignore the sudden flutter in his chest. He pointed a trembling finger at the map. "Routes are lighting up across the eastern provinces, troop movements that don't align with the border defense. He's pulling loyalists into the inner city, centralizing power. He is quietly removing any noble who might question how he took control of the military Sokolinly." Jian's jaw tightened. "He is erasing witnesses." Luo Wen finally looked up at him. Their faces were inches apart. "He thinks you're dead, Your Highness." A charged silence passed between them. Jian's eyes darkened, dropping for a fraction of a second to Luo Wen's lips before snapping back to his eyes. "Then we use that," Jian whispered. The decision. They left the pavilion before dawn. Luo Wen had never traveled with a man who walked the way Jian did. The prince was aware of every shifting shadow, every snap of a twig, every reflection in the puddles along the dirt road. It made Luo Wen hyper-aware of his own softness. He clutched his satchel of scrolls too tightly. His heart thudded far too loudly in his own ears. On the merchant cart traveling closer to the inner city, Jian did not sleep. He sat in the shadows of the canvas cover, his dark eyes fixed entirely on Luo Wen. "You can still walk away from this," Jian said quietly over the rattling of the wooden wheels. Luo Wen shook his head. "No, I can't." "Why?" Luo Wen hesitated, his fingers twisting into the fabric of his robes. "Because if I do, you will walk into the capital alone." Jian held his gaze for a long time. The space between them felt thick, pulling like a tide. That answer, that simple, foolish, profoundly loyal answer, frightened Jian more than treason ever had. The inner city. The lion's den. The imperial capital was a sprawling beast of red walls, golden roofs, and quiet, suffocating ambition. It did not look like a place where kingdoms bled out behind sliding doors. Luo Wen rented a small, unassuming room above a tea house in the outer ring. He immediately set up his inkstones and maps. Jian stood by the paper screen window, a bamboo hat obscuring his face, blending into the shadows of the rooms if he had been born in them. "This is where Ming feels safest," Jian said, his eyes scanning the streets below. "So this is where he will make mistakes." Luo Wen was tracking Ming's communications in real time now. intercepting the carrier pigeons that landed at a nearby military outpost. Patterns emerged. Secret meetings, scheduled with Lords Jian knew, men who had once pledged their lives to the Crown Prince. They are afraid, Luo Wen murmured, reading an intercepted scroll. They aren't following him out of loyalty. They are following out of fear. Good, Jian said, stepping away from the window. Fear changes sides quickly. Luo Wen glanced at him, noticing the dangerous calm in the prince's posture. You aren't angry. Jian's expression didn't waver. Anger is loud, Luo Wen. I need to be quiet. The first close call. They noticed the tail too late. It was a guard in plain clothes. He appeared twice in Luo Wen's peripheral vision, while he was buying ink at the market. When Luo Wen turned into an alley, the man lingered too long at the entrance. Luo Wen's pulse spiked. He turned around to run, but a hand suddenly grabbed his wrist, pulling him hard into the shadow of a narrow doorway. Luo Wen gasped, but a warm, calloused hand clamped gently over his mouth. It was Jian. Jian pressed Luo Wen against the stone wall of the alley, his body caging him incompletely. Luo Wen could feel the hard muscle of Jian's chest against his own, the rapid beat of his heart. Jian's eyes were fierce, focused on the street, but his thumb subconsciously stroked the skin of Luo Wen's cheek, where his hand rested. Breathe, Jian whispered against Luo Wen's ear, his breath hot and sending a violent shiver down Luo Wen's spine. Do not move. The plainclothes guard walked past the alley, looking around, before eventually turning the corner and disappearing. Jian slowly lowered his hand from Luo Wen's mouth, but he didn't step back. They stood trapped in the narrow space, the sounds of the market fading into the background. Luo Wen's breathing was ragged, his chest rising and falling against Jian's. They found us, Luo Wen whispered, his voice trembling. No, Jian said softly, his gaze dropping to Luo Wen's lips again. They suspect something. There is a difference. Luo Wen realized then that this constant suffocating edge of danger, this dance with death, was Jian's normal. And Jian realized, feeling the way Luo Wen didn't pull away from his touch, that this fragile scholar was stepping into the fire without hesitation. What fear reveals. They relocated to a cheaper, more discreet inn on the absolute edge of the city. The room was tiny. There was only one bed. Luo Wen sat on the floor, his back pressed against the cold wall, trying to steady his shaking hands. The reality of what they were doing, hunting the most powerful general in the empire, was finally crashing down on him. Jian crouched in front of him. He reached out, gently taking Luo Wen's trembling hands in his own. Look at me, Jian commanded softly. Luo Wen raised his eyes. You are safe right now, Jian said. Luo Wen let out a weak, breathy laugh. You don't know that, Your Highness. I do, Jian said, his voice dropping an octave, heavy with a vow that transcended titles. Because I am here. Something in Luo Wen's chest cracked open. He had never depended on a person before. He had only depended on scrolls, logic, code, and shadows. This was different. This was visceral. This was terrifying. The almost confession. That night, they lay on the same narrow bed. They weren't touching, but they were acutely aware of each other's body heat in the dark. Every breath felt amplified. Every shift of the fabric sounded like a thunderclap. Luo Wen, Jian said quietly into the dark. Yes? You should be afraid of me. Luo Wen turned his head on the wooden pillow, looking at Jian's profile, illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the paper window. I am not. You don't know the things I have done, Jian whispered, a trace of bitterness in his voice. The blood on my hands for this throne. I know what you didn't do, Luo Wen replied softly. You didn't leave me behind when I was scared. A thick, heavy silence filled the room. It felt alive. Jian stared at the ceiling. He realized then that Ming had not just tried to kill him. He had stripped Jian of the ability to believe he deserved anything gentle in this world. And Luo Wen, without even trying, was handing that belief back to him, piece by fragile piece, across the city, inside the heavily guarded military compound. General Ming received a whisper from a spy. A rumor of a man matching the Crown Prince's description, seen moving through the outer markets with a scholar. Ming did not panic. He smiled, pouring himself a cup of warm wine. "Find him," Ming said calmly to his shadow guards, "and bring me the boy who is helping him." Because Ming understood something Jian had not yet admitted to himself. A prince alone was dangerous. But a prince with something to lose was predictable. Part 3. Fault lines. Dawn broke over the capital like a secret reluctantly told. Luo Wen woke before Jian, not because he was rested, but because his mind refused to unclench. For a few seconds, looking at the cracked wooden ceiling, he forgot where he was. Then he felt the heavy, unfamiliar weight of an arm draped over his waist, and he remembered everything at once. Jian slept on his side, his body turned entirely toward Luo Wen. In sleep, the hard, ruthless lines of the warrior prince softened. The grief and the burden of the crown loosened their grip, making him look young, human, vulnerable. Luo Wen lay perfectly still, barely breathing. The warmth of Jian's body pressed against his side sent a dangerous, forbidden heat pooling in his stomach. He watched the steady rise and fall of Jian's chest, feeling a deep, terrifying emotion settle permanently in his soul. It wasn't just responsibility anymore. It was love. He slipped out of the bed with agonizing care, terrified of waking the prince, and returned to his scrolls. He laid out the intercepted ciphers, and then he saw it. A pattern that made his blood run cold. Ming wasn't just looking for Jian anymore. Ming was creating a web of false information, leaving digital-like breadcrumbs in the courier routes, waiting to see who would intercept them. Ming was hunting the weaver. Ming was hunting him. The realization. Jian woke to the sound of Luo Wen's breathing hitching. "What is it?" Jian asked, his voice thick with sleep as he pushed himself up. Luo Wen didn't turn around. "He knows you are alive." Jian's eyes sharpened instantly. He was no longer a sleeping man. He was the apex predator of the Empire once again. How? He doesn't know for sure, but he is mapping the anomalies. He is tracking the places where his surveillance loses clarity, where someone is reading his letters and erasing the tracks. He is baiting a trap for me. Luo Wen finally turned to look at the prince. He is hunting the ghost. Jian understood immediately. The atmosphere in the room shifted, growing suffocatingly tense. Jian looked at Luo Wen, his jaw set. This ends sooner than I planned. Returning to the shadows, Jian left the inn disguised in a peasant's cloak. He went to a hidden courtyard behind a forgotten temple. He did not bring a sword. He simply brought his seal dot. He met with 3 men in the shadows, the commanders of his elite shadow guard, men who answered only to the blood of the emperor, not the military command. He did not raise his voice. He did not explain where he had been. He simply spoke, names, dates, and instructions. Luo Wen waited in the inn, pacing the floorboards. He realized he was witnessing the silent, terrifying reassembly of a fallen dragon. Men who had been hiding in fear began to draw their blades in the dark. Old loyalties, dormant for weeks, stirred carefully awake. Ming had built his new power on the absolute certainty that Jian was gone. Now that certainty was cracking. The argument. When Jian returned to the room just before sunset, the air between them was electric with tension. Luo Wen stood up from his desk. You are going to meet him in person tonight? Yes. That is exactly what he wants. Luo Wen's voice rose, cracking slightly with panic. Jian's expression hardened into a mask of imperial authority. This is my world, Luo Wen. This is my war. And I am in it now, Luo Wen snapped, stepping toward the prince. The words hung in the air, heavier than either of them expected. Jian stared at him. Luo Wen's hands were trembling, but he absolutely refused to look away. He is tracking the patterns, Luo Wen pleaded, his voice dropping to an emotional whisper. If you move on him, he will see it. If you gather your guards, he will know. You are walking directly into a net. Jian stepped closer, closing the distance between them until they were mere inches apart. He looked down into Luo Wen's desperate eyes. And if I do nothing, he tightens the net around you. They stood there, chests heaving, anger disguising a desperate, unspoken terror that neither of them wanted to name. Luo Wen's voice broke first. I can't lose you. The confession slipped out unguarded, raw and bleeding. Jian froze. The imperial mask shattered completely. He looked at Luo Wen not as a prince looking at a subject, but as a man looking at his entire world. Jian exhaled slowly, raising a hand to cup Luo Wen's face. His thumb brushed gently over Luo Wen's cheekbone. Luo Wen, people like me do not get to beloved safely. Luo Wen leaned into the touch, closing his eyes as a single tear escaped. That is not your decision to make for me. Jian had no answer for that, because for the first time in his brutal, calculated life, someone was choosing him without fear, without political obligation, without seeking power. Someone was just choosing him. And he did not know how to survive the beauty of that. Ming makes his move that evening. A bloodied messenger pigeon arrived at the inn's window. Attached to its leg was a scrap of silk. It was a message from Ming. He had captured 3 of Jian's shadow commanders. He hadn't killed them. He had simply sent a message without writing a word. And know you are watching. Come to the ancestral hall. Luo Wen stared at the silk, dread pooling in his stomach like lead. He is baiting you. Yes, Jian said, strapping his sword to his waist. Don't go. We can find another way. I have to. Luo Wen looked at him, his eyes bright with unshed panic. He reached for his cloak. Then I am coming with you. Jian's instinct was immediate and absolute. He grabbed Luo Wen by the shoulders. No. Luo Wen stepped forward, pushing against Jian's chest. You do not get to protect me by leaving me behind. Silence reigned in the room. The air was thick with unspoken words. Jian looked deeply into Luo Wen's defiant, beautiful eyes. Slowly, Jian nodded once. Stay close to me, he commanded softly. Luo Wen didn't realize until later that this was the exact moment he stopped. Being an outsider looking into the imperial court, he became part of the history. He became part of the king. The touch that changes everything. Before they walked out into the dark streets, Luo Wen reached out and grasped Jian's sleeve, not to stop him, just to anchor himself, just to feel that he was real. Jian looked down at Luo Wen's slender, ink-stained hand holding his dark silk robe. Then Jian shifted his arm, covering Luo Wen's hand with his own. He laced their fingers together. The contact was brief, but it sent a shockwave of heat and possession through both of them. It carried a promise neither of them spoke aloud. If we survive this night, we do not go back to pretending this is nothing. Outside, the capital moved as it always did, bright, unaware, alive. Somewhere in that massive city, General Ming waited. And for the first time since he bled in the bamboo forest, Crown Prince Jian was no longer running. He was walking directly toward the man who had betrayed him. But this time, he was not walking alone. Part 4. What survives the fire night settled over the imperial ancestral hall with the calm indifference of a witness that would never speak. Luo Wen had memorized the architectural blueprints of the ancient temple. It was scheduled for renovation, isolated at the edge of the royal grounds. Ming wanted privacy. Ming wanted absolute control. Jian wanted the exact same thing. They arrived in the shadows. Luo Wen climbed to the roof of a neighboring pavilion, hiding among the carved stone dragons. He unrolled his scrolls in the dark. He had brought small bamboo tubes filled with black powder and flares, positioning them strategically around the courtyard earlier that day. He watched Jian walk the final stretch alone, his dark robes blending with the night, His posture relaxed in that terrifying, lethal way that only truly dangerous men could manage. Luo Wen's throat felt tight. He had tracked thousands of secrets across the empire. He had never watched someone he loved walk into a trap. Inside the cavernous, dimly lit ancestral hall, General Ming stood beneath the towering statues of the past emperors. His hands were clasped behind his back. His expression was almost fond. "Jian," Ming said, his voice echoing off the ancient stones, "you look terrible." Jian stepped into the light of the incense braziers. He did not smile. "You missed your heart shot." Ming tilted his head, his armor clinking softly. "I rarely do. Perhaps my hand hesitated. 10 years of brotherhood is heavy." They studied each other like reflections warped by time and blood. "You always trusted too easily, Jian," Ming continued, pacing slowly. "That was your great weakness. You thought loyalty was a shield, but loyalty is just a chain." Jian's voice was as cold as the northern winter. "No, my weakness was trusting the wrong man." Ming's gaze sharpened. He stopped pacing. "Where is he?" Jian did not pretend ignorance. "He is safe." Ming chuckled, a dark, hollow sound. "You think I do not know? A ghost in my courier networks, a scholar with a brilliant mind, pulling apart my plans string by string. You brought a civilian into a war of wolves?" Jian's eyes flashed with a lethal, possessive fury. "You brought him into this when you tried to erase me." Luo Wen's choice. On the roof, Luo Wen watched the shadows moving in the courtyard below. He counted the heartbeats in his ears. Then he saw it. Dozens of Ming's hidden archers melting out of the tree line, knocking their arrows, aiming directly into the open doors of the ancestral hall. Ming had not come to talk. He had come to finish the assassination. Luo Wen didn't think. Logic vanished. He only moved. For the first time in his life, Luo Wen threw away his caution. He grabbed a lit incense stick and slammed it into the fuse of his primary black powder line. The breaking point inside the hall. The conversation snapped like a bowstring pulled too tight. Ming raised 2 fingers. The signal to fire. Jian drew his sword, fully prepared to die, fighting. But before the arrows could fly, the night sky exploded. "Jian!" Luo Wen's voice screamed from the rooftops, echoing across the grounds. Both men turned. For a split second, Jian's stoic control shattered into pure panic. "Luo Wen, no!" Ming smiled slowly. "There is the little bird." What Ming miscalculated, Ming believed Luo Wen was leverage. He believed Luo Wen was a weakness that would force Jian to his knees. He did not understand that Luo Wen had not come to be a hostage. He had come prepared. A series of deafening explosions rocked the courtyard. Blinding white smoke and red signal flares shot into the dark sky, the imperial distress signals. The black powder Luo Wen had laid ignited the surrounding bamboo scaffolding, creating a wall of fire between the archers and the temple doors. Chaos erupted. Horses screamed. Archers stumbled back, blinded by the smoke and fire. Jian moved like a demon unleashed. He surged forward, his blade flashing in the firelight. He disarmed Ming's personal guards in 3 fluid, devastating strikes. Blood sprayed against the stone floor. Ming drew his own sword, panic finally breaking his calm facade. He tried to retreat toward the side exit. Jian caught him. Their swords clashed with a sound that rang like a cracked bell. Sparks flew as they locked blades, pushing against each other. Years of brotherhood collapsing into a violence that neither of them could ever undo. "You should have stayed dead in the mud," Ming spat, his face twisted in rage. "You should have stayed loyal," Jian whispered dangerously. With a twist of his wrist, Jian shattered Ming's guard, driving the hilt of his sword violently into Ming's chest, dropping the general to his knees. The end of a kingdom. The sounds of war horns echoed from the inner city. Luo Wen's signal flares had worked. The Imperial City Guard, the Emperor's personal army, was swarming toward the ancestral hall. Ming heard them. His sword fell from his trembling hand. He looked up at Jian, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. "You summoned the Emperor's guard?" Ming breathed, disbelief washing over his face. "You expose this. You expose us both." Luo Wen appeared in the doorway, coughing through the thick smoke, his robe stained with soot. He ran to Jian's side, grabbing his arm. "No one wins tonight?" Jian said down to Ming. Jian looked at Luo Wen. A profound understanding passed between them. This was not about revenge anymore. This was about escape. Ming realized it seconds too late. By the time the Imperial Guards stormed the burning courtyard, shouting orders and subduing the traitorous archers, Jian and Luo Wen had already slipped into the dense, smoky shadows of the forest. Ming was left kneeling in the ruins of his own ambition, waiting to be chained. Empires built in the dark do not survive the blinding light of the fire. The aftermath. Dawn found Jian and Luo Wen sitting on the edge of a cliff miles away, overlooking a quiet, mist-covered valley far from the capital. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Jian's sword rested on the grass. His knuckles were bruised. Luo Wen's hands were still trembling from the adrenaline of the night, his head resting lightly against Jian's shoulder. "It is over," Luo Wen said softly, watching the sun paint the clouds in gold. Jian stared out at the horizon. "No, it is gone." There was a difference. The court would fracture. The military factions would scatter. The throne Jian had been groomed for his entire life was now a bloody, burning mess of politics he no longer wanted any part of. He had left his imperial jade token in the ancestral hall. The Crown Prince was officially dead. And he didn't feel loss. He felt an overwhelming, dizzying relief. What remains? "You can disappear now," Jian said quietly, turning to look at Luo Wen. "You are very good at that." Luo Wen shifted, lifting his head to meet Jian's deep, intense gaze. "Do you want me to?" Jian's eyes searched Luo Wen's face, the soot on his cheek, the exhaustion in his beautiful eyes, the fierce, unyielding loyalty that had saved a king. For the first time in his life, Jian allowed himself to want something without calculating the political cost. "No," Jian whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Luo Wen's breath hitched slightly, his lips parting. "Good," he replied softly. The confession that doesn't hurt." They sat shoulder to shoulder as the world woke up around them. "I was afraid to care about you," Jian finally admitted. The words feeling foreign but necessary on his tongue. Luo Wen smiled faintly, a warm, genuine expression that made Jian's heart ache. "I was afraid you wouldn't." Jian slowly turned his hand palm up, resting it on the grass between them. Luo Wen looked down at the scarred, powerful hand. He reached out and placed his own hand inside it, lacing their fingers together perfectly. There was no urgency. There was no fear. There were no assassins, no crowns, and no shadows. There was just warmth. Epilogue. A smaller life months later, in a quiet, sun-drenched courtyard in a southern tea village, far away from the blood and silk of the capital. Luo Wen sat at a wooden desk by an open window, translating ancient poetry, the breeze rustling his loose white robes. Jian was in the kitchen, cursing softly as he tried and failed to cook a simple fish without burning it. There were still letters. There were still scars that ached when it rained. But there was no empire left to defend. There was only a life they were learning how to live together. And sometimes, late at night, when the village was silent, Luo Wen's brush would pause over his inkstone. Jian would walk up behind him, wrapping strong arms around his waist, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to the side of Luo Wen's neck. Jian's hand would find his without looking. And in those quiet, perfect moments, they both understood the same unspoken truth. General Ming had tried to end a prince, but instead, he had given a man a reason to finally begin. If you want the next part, the uncensored continuation, and more unlimited 18+ ancient royal BL stories, come join Spicy Ancient BL on Patreon. The link is waiting for you in the description and pinned comment.